Okay, so this tutorial is going to cover building a one-point perspective through the diagonal point method. And so the first thing we need to do, there's a couple series of sequences steps here that we need to follow in order to get this accomplished. And I'm going to go through them one at a time, and this is essentially going to terminate with the construction of the grid. There's going to be a follow-up tutorial that actually show you how to build geometry once you have the grid constructed. So the first thing we need to do, step one, is going to be to draw a horizon line. And that's going to essentially, if we hold shift here, I'm going to draw this perfectly parallel to the edge here. Oop, I actually draw the line there. So to draw that, second thing we need to establish is a vanishing point, since we are drawing a one-point perspective. And that has to lie on the horizon line. Okay, so you go ahead and draw that. The third thing we need to establish is that essentially the ground line, which will establish the height of our character here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to place this in here, and the average human being is about 6 feet tall, and so I'm just going to type 6, and so that's going to be our measured unit there, and I'm going to create a series of little tick marks. And I recommend that you guys use your scale as you guys are doing this. So if I move this down 1 here, and then I'm going to go ahead and give ourselves some units. So we'll go ahead and go. Okay, and that gives us a unit of measure. Now, what that means is that everything that's actually in the picture plane is going to be at a specific scale. So whatever this is, if you're using a half-inch scale, that's going to be where you can take all of the measurements from your drawing and actually establish them. So this is assuming that you guys have a plan and a section that you can actually take measurements from here. And once we have that established, we can take this and we can we'll go ahead and copy that up. So we can measure upwards and downwards here. And then also, since we're in the picture plane, we can also copy this over. I'm just going to go type. And we can go ahead and rotate this into place. Okay, and that establishes a mechanism for us to start to measure that. All right, and then we can take that and we can go ahead and really get those off. And so anything that lands in our picture plane is going to be able to exist within that unit of measure here, okay? And then what we can do is we can start projecting lines back. So we can take this and get a couple of our edges here, okay? And so this starts to give us that sort of infinite vanishing point where we have a geometry in here that's starting to draw back into the infinite plane here. The next thing we need to do, once we've had all of those things established, we need to establish our diagonal point. Now, just as a sort of a quick lesson on this, there is a technical way of measuring this. I found it to be relatively okay though, just to essentially mirror about wherever axis you are measuring against. So what we do is we take that and draw a line from this point all the way to our other edge. And then from there we can start to break down. I'm just going to do this in every unit of 3 so you guys will be able to see this a little bit more clearly. I actually made a mistake right there. And so what that gives us is wherever the diagonal line from the diagonal point intersects with one of our measuring lines moving back to the vanishing point gives us a unit of measure that'll give us our depth. And so I'll go ahead and start to be able to establish a grid with that. And you'll start to see very quickly that we can start to establish a unit of measure. So you guys can use your t-squares and your triangles to start to draw that out. And you'll note that I'm doing this at a scale that's convenient for what we're measuring here. And you're going to want to do this on a piece of trace paper. What I'd recommend you guys do as well as you guys are drawing this is that you set this up in such a way that you actually are going to be able to very easily line up your graphics. And to do that, and what I'd recommend you guys do is when you're looking at this, you want to make sure that you are keeping separate certain areas of content. I'm only going to draw the ground area here, and I'm going to leave out the side. And that will enable us to start to interchange these and use our trace paper so we can start to overlay our graphics very easily. All right, and so you can start to see there's a grid forming on the ground here. And as we move along, it starts to get thinner and thinner, and so we start to get this real clear sense of depth. Each one of these little blocks in here is then essentially a 3 foot by 3 foot unit as we start to measure that back. All right, so if we want to come in here, we can actually create a little exactly how we can start to construct this. All right, and so that's basically how you guys are going to set up the diagonal point method and build your grid. Obviously, you're going to be doing this with drafting tools, and so you want to pay attention to the thickness of your pencils as you're using this, because if you have too heavy a pencil, as we get farther and farther back, it's going to be harder to read this. And the reason I'm doing this in the computer is so that we can zoom in and zoom out, and you guys can get a sense of exactly where things belong relative to your geometries. Okay.